This episode of Deep Dive Unknown could be
Our best yet.
Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You come across just the head of a massive shark, a 550-pound mako.
Yeah, that's not just any fish. That's a serious predator itself.
Exactly. And this happened back in 2019 off the coast of New South Wales, Australia. The photos, well, they went viral. Just bizarre.
And immediately people started thinking, some kind of mega predator must be out there.
Right. But what's really interesting, and maybe less known, is that this wasn't just a one-off strange event.
Scientists, they've actually been looking closely at these waters for a while now, going back to, 2003.
Yeah, there's been some, let's say, intriguing data suggesting something unusual has been happening down there for quite some time.
Which is what we're getting into today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got some really compelling source material around these events, and our mission, really, is to unpack what it all tells us about a potential, huge ocean predator off Australia.
Okay, so let's rewind. Back to 2003. That's where one of the big initial puzzles comes from. Our sources talk about CSIRO, that's the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, Australia's national science agency. They had this tagging program.
Focused on great white sharks, tracking their movements.
Precisely. And there was one shark in particular, they called it Shark Alpha.
And this wasn't like a juvenile. It was already a pretty big animal, right? 9, maybe 10 feet long.
Yeah, a substantial shark. But then the tracking data from its tag, it did something really unexpected.
It just went weird.
Completely weird. The tag showed Shark Alpha making this sudden, steep dive right down towards the edge of the continental shelf.
So where the shallow water drops off into the deep ocean?
Exactly. It plunged to around 2,000 feet. But the really telling detail, the part that got scientists scratching their heads, was the temperature.
Ah, the temperature reading.
Yeah. The tag suddenly started sending back this consistent internal temperature reading, around 72 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, and why is that so significant?
Yeah.
At that depth, the water's freezing.
Right. So a constant warm temperature like that. It strongly suggested the tag wasn't just floating around. It had to be inside something else.
Something alive.
Yeah.
Something maintaining its own body heat.
Like an internal thermostat, basically, in the freezing.
Whoa. So the tag was inside the stomach of another creature.
That's really the only logical explanation for that steady warmth. And then you think, okay, Shark Alpha was a 9 or 10-foot great white.
Yeah.
What on earth could possibly eat something that big?
The scale required. I mean,
Yeah.
It just sounds, almost unbelievable, doesn't it? We're talking something enormous.
Truly enormous. Which kind of brings us forward in time, almost 2 decades later, to 2023, another strange event.
This time with pilot whales over in Western Australia.
Yeah, a really distressing situation. A large number of pilot whales stranded themselves, but it was how they did it.
They weren't just scattered.
No, they were all huddled really tightly together, and the rescue teams, they guided them back out to sea, but
They came back?
they just turned around and came right back to the shore, stubbornly.
That's deeply unsettling. What's the theory there?
Well, the prevailing idea is that these whales, which are incredibly smart social animals, they were actively fleeing something.
Something big enough, scary enough to make the whole pod panic and beach themselves together, like a unified fear response.
Exactly. And you have to ask, what could possibly terrify a whole pod of pilot whales like that?
A regular great white probably wouldn't do it, right? There's safety in numbers for the whale.
That's what our sources suggest, yeah. A typical great white isn't likely to cause that kind of mass panic.
So the speculation starts again. Could it be something much, much bigger?
I mean, the source material even floats the idea of something maybe 65 feet long.
65 feet. That's huge, like a bus.
It's massive. And it makes you, the listener, wonder, right, could these things be connected? The shark head in 2019, shark alpha back in 2003, these terrified whales in 2023, all in the same sort of region.
Are they all pointing to some colossal, maybe unknown predator?
Well, just when you think you're heading down one path, the story takes another sharp turn. Remember that 72-degree temperature from Shark Alpha's tag?
Yeah, the big mystery.
For years, it was just that, a mystery. But then scientists were looking at tracking data from other great whites tagged in the same area.
Okay.
And they noticed something. The movements of some of these other sharks, they kind of mirrored Shark Alpha's final dive.
Huh. Similar patterns.
And then came the real bombshell, that temperature spike, that 72 degrees.
Yeah.
They compared it to the known internal body temperature of, well, another great white shark.
Right. Well, you're saying the temperature matched another great white.
Exactly.
But everyone assumed it had to be something else. Because Shark Alpha was already so big, how could another great white eat it?
That was the assumption, right, that no other great white could possibly be large enough. It seemed impossible.
The unbelievable explanation
Is that Shark Alpha wasn't eaten by some mythical sea monster, but most likely by another, even bigger great white shark, a cannibal.
A cannibal great white. How big are we talking?
The estimate is around 16 feet long.
16 feet. Okay, that's gigantic for a great white. How does that even happen?
The theory proposed is something called giantism, basically a biological fluke. Think abnormally high levels of growth hormone.
Like runaway growth, a super shark.
Pretty much. A 16-footer could weigh over 2 tons. That's more than double Shark Alpha's weight.
Wow. Okay, and is cannibalism? I mean, is that common for sharks?
Well, our sources point out that larger sharks preying on smaller sharks isn't actually that unusual. It happens.
Right.
So the idea of a truly giant one doing it while still startling becomes maybe a little less fantastical.
Okay. It's still pretty wild, though.
Right.
But what about the deep dive? Why drag it down to nearly 2,000 feet? Great whites don't usually hang out that deep, do they?
It's unusual, yeah, but not unheard of. Our sources mention they have been recorded going even deeper, over 4,000 feet sometimes.
Really?
And the timing is key here. The temperature spike indicating Shark Alpha was actually eaten happened right at the end of that deep dive.
Ah, so not during the descent.
No. The theory is the giant shark grabbed the smaller one, plunged rapidly into the crushing depth and darkness.
To disorient it, weaken it.
Exactly. Make it easier to subdue and kill. It sounds, well, brutal.
Brutal is right. So hearing all this, it does make you think twice about, swimming in certain areas.
Yeah. Maybe give Bremer Bay a miss next holiday, though our source does offer a little comfort.
Please.
Sharks generally aren't interested in eating humans. We're not really on the menu. So, you're probably safe from this specific giant cannibal.
Probably safe. Okay, I'll take probably. But still, picturing a 16-foot, 2-ton monster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get the hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
So is that it then? Is that the consensus? A giant cannibal great white is the explanation for these incidents?
That seems to be the prevailing scientific opinion, yeah. Based on the data, especially that temperature match, it fits.
It does tie things together in a shocking way.
But it does leave you the final question, doesn't it?
Which
Is a giant shark definitely the answer for everything? Or when you think about how vast the ocean is, how little we've actually seen.
Could there still be something else? Something even stranger down there?
It's a thought to consider.
So we went from this mystery of a mako shark head to this incredible, almost unbelievable story of a giant cannibal great white. It's just a powerful reminder of how much we don't know about the ocean.
Absolutely. And our source really drives that home. Only about 20% of the ocean floor is mapped. And actual exploration, maybe 1 or 2%.
1 or 2% explored. That's tiny.
It leaves something like 80% completely uncharted territory,
That's
a
tough.
vast realm where, frankly, almost anything could exist, completely unknown to us.
It really does make you think. What else might be lurking in that other 80%? Something to ponder. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Thanks as always for watching today, and if you like our videos, please don't forget to click on the like button and comment in the comments section. And if you already haven't done so, why not subscribe? It is completely free.